minutes and would recognize the fact that Mr. Capuano once again has been very gracious to our colleagues on the other side to skip his time so that others may go first.
I don't think Capuano and gracious go together in the same sentence, but certainly I would defer to your judgment, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Feinberg, you heard what CSX raised about the potential conflict with the hard deadline and whether or not their continued carriage of inhalables and other hazardous and passenger. Can you resolve that, or do we have to statutorily resolve that?
The Congress is going to have to act. I cannot make a legal decision for CSX based on their liability. And
you can't give relief because of the hard deadline that was set?
I cannot extend the deadline.
Okay. Now, you talked about enforce and you talked about penalties, and I'd just like to get a little insight into that. We're looking forward now, and there's a lot of history here that, a lot of questions about how we got to this point and how some people are much closer to meeting the deadline than others, et cetera. So are you looking at penalties that exact funds from the railroads? Wouldn't it be better if you mandate everybody puts together a schedule that you would approve or not approve in terms of how quickly they can implement, put in benchmarks, and then look at assessing penalties going forward?
Well, that would really be extending the deadline. That would be our view. I mean, the deadline is the deadline, and if we then communicate to railroads, if you don't like the deadline that we have, why don't you come up with a plan that involves a new deadline for yourself? That would actually, in my opinion, be extending the deadline. So, so we would not want to go about that. But in terms of the penalties, there is, 3 or 4 pages of specific fines and penalties that were finalized back in 2010 that, go from everything from not equipping a locomotive to failure to have PTC in a certain segment. So it's quite detailed and it's in the public realm.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at here is everybody here wants to get this done as quickly as possible. There's a lot of history. And in order to go forward, I'm wondering, if we give you flexibility from the deadline, but we give you a mandate that it will be implemented as soon as practicable, technologically and physically practicable, by each of those who do not meet, and then you set benchmarks, and then they violate the benchmarks. That's when I think fines might be appropriate. Would that be a way to go forward?
Well, I take my cues from the Congress, and I enforce what the Congress mandates. So if the Congress instructs us to enter negotiations like that, we would do that. But again, my concern would be entering into brand new negotiations with each individual railroad based on what they would like their new deadline to be.
Well, I'm not thinking so much what they would like. I'm saying that's why as soon as practicable physically, and not something that meets their convenience or their capital outlays or whatever. It's just like, anyway, this is a difficult issue. Quick to the FCC. You now have the capacity to deal with these poll applications and approvals in a streamlined way. And as I understand it, there are quite a few that have not been applied for, and you aren't pushing your capacity here. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. Thank you. We have since our streamlined process was put into place, we've had the capacity to review about 40,000 polls. To date, we've only received applications to review about 8,300. So we're ready for more work. Okay. That's something to take into account as we're moving forward. This is off the subject, but I got to ask you very quickly, Mr. Mathias, 5.9 gigahertz. We get part of the problem here was you have to go out and buy spectrum and negotiate, and Amtrak had to negotiate, and this that was. I'm really concerned about what you might do with the 5.9 gigahertz for smart cars and communication between vehicles of the future. There's some proposals to maybe parcel that up a little bit, which might lead to interference, which might lead us to a point where smart car manufacturers in the future are going to have to go out and buy spectrum as opposed to having something reserved. And I just hope you would take that under advisement. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Okay. And then to CSX, how soon can you get it done?
At CSX, our plans call for us to be hardware installed, meaning all of the wayside interface units, all the the obsolete signal replacement work that we're doing, all the locomotives equipped, all the technology hardware installed by the end of 2018 with full deployment by 2020. And as I say that, though, I think it's important to know that by the end of 2018, we will have a significant portion of the system operable, so it's not as if we get to 2020 and then we turn on the 11,000 miles that we have under our PTC footprint. It is a very methodical, almost linear implementation pretty much from here on out. We'll have about 500 miles in place by the end of the year, which is about the size of the corridor and about the size of the Metrolink deployment, and then we get into the thousands of miles per year that ramps us up through 2020.
Well, again, that seems like, a long time, and that's why I was proposing the idea that the administrator, I don't think we should be giving people a blanket exemption until 2020, because some people are going to then take till 2020 who don't need to. Maybe you do, but I think there needs to be some level of review of that, and I think that's something the committee will be looking at. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Ms. Feinberg.